right. Good morning, Kristina.
Good morning, Anna. And good
And good
morning,
morning.
Jamie.
Good morning to our special guest. In 1988, you heard a cassette of Ram Dass. And then in 1994, when you met him in person, your life was changed forever. And you decided your life shifted and you focused more on unity. You traveled the world, you made some beautiful documentaries. You made a TED Talk talking about one of these tours where you traveled the world and you had musicians contribute to music. You founded this project called the 15 Minutes of Friendship, which is amazing. Anyone listening who has children can go to 15minutesoffriendship.com. We'll put the link in the show notes. And the idea is that people are unified when they understand and know each other. So the idea is that if your child connects to someone in another country for just 15 minutes, they're going to be more moved and touched when they see things on the war happening in another country, for example. It doesn't become so distant. Then you made a docuseries in 2004, What About Me? You did the documentary, Becoming Nobody, which is all about Ram Dass in 2019, which we have a whole episode basically about that. You were the keynote speaker for the Human Potential series in 2020, and currently you are delivering coaching and workshops about basically Adam and Eve healing the primary wound of the planet. And one of your recent series is The Bitches and Bastards, where you're working on healing the wounds between the male and the female dynamic. So that's really well, you go ahead. That's what we're really interested in.
I don't think 15 Minutes of Friendship is live at the moment. It's going between different schools and connections and everything, so people can't quite go and see too much about getting the children to all hook up with each other. But the other things are mostly live.
I went to the website and it said join us. So yeah.
Okay,
I'll take that out.
No, that was
said join us, so I thought it was up.
Yeah, great. Keep it there. Fine.
All right. Great.
So Jamie, one of the first questions we wanted to ask you is that I was going back and watching some of your past lectures, discourses, interviews, things like that. And this season, what we're talking about is the root chakra. So, we're kind of covering Tantra, we're kind of covering a lot of different things, but more so what I see it as is the interplay between the divine feminine aspect within us, or the feminine energy aspect with us, and the divine masculine. And I've heard you talk about the Taoist and Yin and Yang. Would you kind of expand on that from that perspective, since we've kind of covered some
I'm not sure my angle on it or it will be that useful to you, but I guess one starting point is, the ancient Taoists, as you know, they have the yin yang symbol that we all know very, very well, and they split the dualistic environment that we live in into the duality of yin and yang. Yang being what they would say masculine. We don't need to use the genders so much, get ourselves into trouble in this day and age.
Right.
But the part of each of us, boys and girls, that penetrates the world, that does things, that uses our will, that ends the thing, gets to the finish line, has a point. The part of us that does things, the outward penetrative doing force. But one thing we're not really taught so much in schools is the other whole half of us, which is the feminine yin, which is the receptive, the part of us that is moved by life, that a great idea pops into your head, the part of us that's receptive, that's curious, that's listening, that sits in space, the part that gets into the flow state and is moved. So, there've been a lot of books written by great sportsmen on how to get into the flow state, and really it's when you let life do you. When you're dancing, you're yin, because you're letting yourself be moved by the beat rather than deliberately doing dance steps like this or like that. Real dancing or enjoyable dance. A lot of people are like, God, I couldn't live without my dancing, my ecstatic dance or my 5 rhythms once a week. And it's like, yeah, because it's the only time in your life where you can let go of your control trips and your busyness and your to-do list and your kind of agenda, and actually let go and be moved. So when you dance, you're yin. When you laugh, you're yin. We use the active word I laugh as if you do it on purpose, but really when you laugh, you're just minding your own business. Something funny happens and a laugh erupts through you, which you find funny. And it's more accurate, I think, to say I am laughed, or I am smiled, because it's something that you're being moved by, you know. And where does this get practical? So when we are doing creative things, the yin is where the real genius of projects is to be found, because, as I said, a great idea pops into your head. We don't create an idea. It just arrives. We don't know where from. It's one of the great mysteries. When I write a song, I don't with the guitar go, I will play G, I will play C. You don't kind of like think up and build a song with building blocks. You hear a melody. When you're listening for something and you hear something, your yin, it came to you. So the great treasure of a great song happens in a yin state. And then you use your yang to then write down the chords and go to the recording studio and do things. But the actual essence, the actual treasure part comes from us when we're yin, when we're receptive. And it's not just in creative things, in parenting. We were all brought up in, well, maybe you guys, but when I was younger, we were brought up with very yang parenting, where you molded the child, you know, and it was like, get your shoes on, get a haircut, be an accountant. We will make this child how we think it should be. Whereas we've all learned since then that the intelligent, compassionate, and efficient way to parent a child is the yin thing. So you're listening to the child, you're sensitive to the child. That's a yin quality. And when you pick up whatever you pick up, you be the space around the child for it to expand into whatever beautiful tomato plant it wants to be. That's a yin quality, being the space around something, holding the space. And with sex, another one of the great treasures. You know, if you're yang in your sex, if you're just like, I'll do this, I'll do that, and it's all prescribed and exact, and you know what you're doing, and you're doing this in a list, you know, some bits might work. But if you're sensitive, if you're in your yin and you're totally with who you're with, and you're listening to every curve, every smell, every moan, every shape, you're totally in the moment, curious and sensitive, and listening to the exact energy that's coming off this person or people, whoever you're with, then you will have the most beautiful lovemaking available. So really the great treasure of life is in the yin listening. So it's not to say the yang isn't super important. You've got to do stuff in this short life. But for me, I try and make my yang, my doing, my deliberate use of my will, the servant of my yin. So first comes the yin when it goes, this is a good idea. And it knows in the deep stillness and the listening and the curiosity, yes, that's true. That's yin. And then it instructs the yang, like, go and get the hammer and nails and the wood and build one of those. So the yang is the servant, the yang doing is the servant of the yin listening. Speaking is a yang thing to do. So the yin listening opens the channel when somebody's hurt or they need your advice or they've asked you a question in an interview. The yin hears it, the yang says it. And that's why people mistake male leadership with destination choosing. They're not the same thing. Destination choosing is actually a very yin thing. It's where, oh, we need to go over there. It's a feminine thing. So it's like the feminine goes, oh, we need to go over there, and then instructs the yang, pack up the car and lead us all over there. But the yang leadership is at the service to the feminine knowing in each of us, boys and girls.
Kind of like the duality of we are not the doers of action, but we have to act like we're the doers of action kind of thing. It's all being done, and yet we still have to act like we are doing.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's a nice yin way to look at it. We're being moved to do it.
Yeah.
And it's also very connected to the Holy Grail, if you're feeling Christian or Arthurian. The idea of the Holy Grail, the quest for the Holy Grail, is that we are poured into. So it's like, how open can you be to be moved, to be truly a channel or a passenger of the divine spark? You have to let go of your to-do list. You have to let go of your agenda. Like, I should be like this, and your fixed view of things, and open and be poured into. So that's the opposite end chakra right at the top. So we'll get to the crown chakra, I'm sure, later in your podcasts. But when Arthur sent all his knights off to find the Holy Grail, it was Parsifal the Fool, who was the most yin of all, who discovered the Grail and had to ask one question before he was allowed to take the Grail. And that question was, whom does the Grail serve? So it's like, you have to know, like, who are you doing this for? Is this to aggrandize your bank account? Is it to have great status? When you're doing a project, a lot of people think a project was only successful if lots of people came, I got lots of money, and I got tons of positive feedback on Facebook and Instagram. And, you know, that's what value is. How much money did I make and how many people loved me up? And if it doesn't do those things, the project isn't deemed to be a success. But that's very yang, and it's the wrong agenda. If you fix on those two things, you'll never have a successful or an enjoyable creative life. But if you expand your notion of what value means to be a bit more yin, to say, okay, it's not just about the money and how many people gave me self-esteem, which are two okay things, but also it's like, how much intimacy was there in the project and between me and the people I did it and the audience? How much service was there? How good was it for everyone, who made it and where it went? How much learning was there? How much did it spread the influence of good things in the world? When you start looking at the value of something as beyond just me, ego, what did I get for myself? And you go into a more community spirited thing, a more love-based thing, then whether it made money or it didn't make money, or whether lots of people wrote you great 5-star reviews or didn't, you still go to bed with a smile on your face and consider it time well spent. So we have to expand our version of
value. We need a new yardstick or an additional yardstick.
Or maybe it's just a chalice, right? That has no volume measurement, right? It's just how full do you feel today?
And then one more thing just about the yin, which I absolutely love. There's this wonderful book called the Screwtape Letters. There's this author called C.S. Lewis who wrote the Narnia books. And he was a crazy Christian mystic and had really, obviously all the Narnia books are very thinly veiled Christ allegories. But the Screwtape Letters was another one of his books for a slightly older audience, which was letters from an old devil to a younger devil on his nephew on how to best tempt the human he's been allocated. And one of them says, "My dear Wormwood, I notice your human's doing an awful lot of praying at the moment. Don't worry about this. As long as he keeps talking to God and asking God for things and asking for God's forgiveness, and all the energy keeps going from his mouth to God in that direction, we've got nothing to worry about. But if he shuts up for a minute and stops and lets the energy come down in the other direction from God down, filling him up, which, as we all know, is true prayer, then we've got a problem. Call me." And that really, really nails it for me, of just like true prayer, or true allowing the flow state to take us, or true being creative, or true making love, is all about being moved, allowing it to pour down and fill you, it to pour down and move you, more than one have an ego-led mental sort of agenda of we should do this, 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 and this. Being a passenger.
I love it.
Being an active passenger, I guess.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for that. That's such an amazing image. That really
and it's so accurate.
Yeah. But our ego is so in charge of our lives, which is the yang part, because the ego's mission is to avoid all risk or perceived risk. So because it never wants to risk looking stupid, it never wants to risk getting it wrong, it never wants to be ashamed, it never wants to in any way not know the finish line. It wants an Excel sheet where it all adds up and there's something at the bottom that all makes sense and everything is pre-planned, and its idea of safety, because that part of us generally moves most people's lives, which is the opposite of yin. The idea of yin to the ego is terrifying because it's mysterious. You don't know what you're going to get. You don't know how it's going to turn out. You might look a bit stupid. It might involve failure, which is another word for discovery. It might involve a whole bunch of things which the ego doesn't think it wants in its controlling way. So if the more you are into protecting the idea of, oh, it's so terribly important what people think of me, and oh, I must never look stupid, and I must never fail, and everything has to be perfect, and the more you're in that clenched thing, the less genius art will come through you, because you're narrowing the river to a trickle. You're like editing it before it's even come through. That's where writer's block comes from. People with writer's block are egomaniacs and vain. No, that's not fair. But generally people with writer's block think that it's their ego's job to make it good.
Right. Before it even gets a chance to become. It's being molded.
Just do it. Yeah.
You've got to remember, as an artist, as a creator, that even if you went to Picasso's studio, you would see some absolutely incredible masterpieces. You'd see some stuff that was pretty great. And you see some stuff leaning up against the wall over there that was not so great. And you just see the great stuff because the artist only hangs the great stuff on the wall. But to be a great artist, you've got to let it all come through. And you only need to look at a Hendrix album or a Beatles album or whatever. On side 2, halfway through, there's some pretty shoddy album tracks. If you want to have Imagine All the People, you've also got to have Octopus's Garden. And the Beatles were sort of humble enough to put all those tracks on the album. They didn't only keep the masterpieces; they kept the silly ones as well as the incredible ones. Where we get this idea that everybody can only see me when I'm amazing, and no one must ever see me when I'm anything, and I've got to put another filter on my Instagram to make sure no blemishes are, that uptightness, that addiction to some perceived notion of perfection is killing art. It's terrible for art. It's terrible for music.
Yeah. And it's also like I work in a professional setting, and for me, like, being in front of a client is one of those perfect examples of, like, you're never allowed to ever show the blemishes, right, of anything.
Right.
And yet the most successful people I've ever met in my company and elsewhere are the ones that let the blemishes show, because it gains trust. You have no trust without showing mistakes, without showing
Who wants to talk to a mannequin? And it's funny, if you look at the artists or the people that you've fallen in love with, it wasn't their appropriate side, their vanilla side that you fell in love with. It was their edge, it was their uniqueness, it was their quirkiness, it was so it's so ironic that everyone's trying to sand away, smooth off the place, which is actually the place people are going to fall in love with your uniqueness.
Oh yeah.
I mean, when did you ever hear anybody say, "Oh, have you met Brian? Oh, he's so fucking appropriate. He turns me on."
No, I fucking hate perfect people. No, it's true. Like, some of my best friends, the people that I admire the most, are the people who come to me and they're like, I just did X, Y, or Z, this horrible thing. And I'm like, awesome. Like, I think it's a beautiful, thank you for sharing that human experience with me. And I love it.
Yeah, exactly. Humanity's what, and Ram Dass is all about that. Like, he was always trying to be holier than thou, holy, holy, holy. I'm not meditating well enough, or I'm not pure enough. And one of his disembodied spirit friends, Emmanuel, said, look, you were born a human. How about taking the curriculum, which means embracing your humanity? A lot of the shadow workshops I do are all about that. You can't edit away the neediness. People who've got the spiritual path wrong think that their neediness, their greed, their human rage, their lust, all those parts of them mean they're less holy and they're not enlightened enough. But that's not true. You're going to have all those parts as a human. Every human does.
Mm-hmm.
The spiritual ones are the ones that accept that and can love their own rage.
And
without making it destructive for other people. They can love their lust. They can love all these places in themselves, not try and reject them and deny their humanity. They can accept their humanity. They don't maybe let those parts get the steering wheel that often. They don't let those parts.
Well, because they accept them. So they're just loved in there. They're not running.
They're not suppressed. Because the more you push down the beach ball under the surface of the water, the more violently it flies back up. That's why they say, beware the anger of the quiet man. It's the people that embrace their humanity. Like Alan Watts, there's a line in the movie Becoming Nobody where Alan Watts says to Ram Dass, Dick, your problem is you're too attached to emptiness. And it's just like another way of saying, you're trying to deny your humanity. This is such an important thing for people who think they're on a spiritual path. I mean, I've got another whole thing to say about spiritual paths. I think they're a con. But if you think you're on a spiritual path and it's important, make it a path towards your shadows, not on a journey to light, away from darkness. We're on a journey towards light and darkness, to loving the fact that I'm a weird, freaky human, and it includes rage, and it includes lust, and it includes neediness, and it includes greed, and it includes lots of things that the old religious people would say are not holy, but actually embracing those parts of yourself, not letting them govern your life, but allowing them to be there, not being in a self-abandoning judgment about it, is fundamental to being truly spiritual. But beware of paths, because we all know the real spirituality is about being so totally here, present in this moment. There is nothing else. Everything else in the past and future is really an abstraction. So to be truly here now, where are you going on your path away from right here and now, where we're already having a beautiful time?
Pushing the parts you don't like of yourself away, right?
And then chasing after whatever that perfection.
Feeling terribly guilty and self-loathing about it.
That's why we named the podcast This Spiritual Fix, because it's a joke, because there's nothing to fix.
Yeah.
It's just, and Kristina and I, we started our spiritual path on doing Vipassana, and very, rigid, very, very young.